Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Weight of the Wood. A Tale of the Road to Golgotha. Simon came in from the country that morning with nothing on his mind but the Passover lamb he meant to buy. The road into Jerusalem was thick with travellers, and the dust they raised hung yellow in the early light. He had walked since before dawn. The sweat had dried white on the back of his neck. His sons were waiting at the house. Their mother had sent him for the lamb. And there was flour to get, and oil besides. He was thinking of these ordinary things, when the crowd knotted ahead of him, and a sound rose that was not celebration. It was soldiers clearing a path. He pressed his back against a wall to let them pass. Then he saw the man. What he saw was not recognizable as someone who had once been whole. The man's face was a ruin. Dried blood and swelling had made the features beneath almost impossible to read. A crown of thorns had been hammered onto his scalp, and the blood from it had sheeted down in dark layers over older blood until the two could not be told apart. His back was a thing Simon looked at, and then could not stop looking at. The scourge had laid it open from shoulders to waist. The flesh hung in strips, and between the strips the muscle showed. Dark and glistening, he walked barefoot on the paving stones, carrying a crossbeam across the wreckage of his shoulders, and his legs shook with each step, as though the bones inside them had forgotten what they were for. The soldiers walked beside him without hurry. They had done this before. Behind the condemned man, two others shuffled in chains, but the crowd paid them no attention. Everyone looked at the one in front. Some wept, some mocked. One woman near Simon turned away and pressed her face against the stone. Then the man went down. The beam struck the ground with a sound like a door slamming shut, and he lay beneath it, with his cheek in the dirt and his eyes open. The soldiers kicked him. He tried to rise and could not. He tried again, and his arms would not lift him. The body had given all it had. The centurion's hand closed around Simon's arm. He did not ask. He told, "Pick it up." Simon looked at the beam. It was rough-hewn wood, dark with old stains, heavier than it appeared. When he lifted it onto his shoulders, the weight drove his sandals into the dirt. The grain was warm and slick where the man's blood had soaked through. The road to the hill was not long, but Simon would remember every step of it for the rest of his life. The man walked ahead of him, unburdened now of the wood, but carrying something else. Something Simon could feel the way you feel heat from a furnace you cannot see. The crowd pressed close on both sides, and in the noise and the dust and the copper smell of blood, Simon became aware of a strange and terrible thing. The man did not speak. They struck him, and he said nothing. They spat on him, and he said nothing. A woman cried his name from the roadside, and he turned his battered face toward her. But still he did not speak. Simon had seen condemned men before. They cursed their judges. They screamed at God. They bargained with anyone who would listen. This man did none of it. His silence was not the quiet of someone past caring, nor the dullness of a man whose voice had failed. It was chosen, the way a man shuts a door against a storm. Not because he cannot open it, but because what he holds inside is worth more than what rages outside. And in that silence, something old stirred in the back of Simon's memory. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep before its shearers is silent. He had heard those words chanted since boyhood in the synagogue at Cyrene. They had never meant anything to him. Until this road. He looked at the blood on his own hands, where the beam had rubbed them raw. He looked at the blood on the stones, where the man had fallen. The prophets had written of this, not as warning, as blueprint. The lamb he had come to buy was somewhere in the temple market, bleating in a pen. Not knowing that the lamb it had always pointed toward was walking ahead of Simon to the place of slaughter, silent, willing, soaked in his own blood. At Golgotha they stripped him and laid him on the beam. He did not resist. He set his wrists on the wood. The way a man lays himself down to rest after labor, he has carried a long time. The spike was iron, thick as a finger. The soldier placed it against the wrist, and the hammer fell. The sound carried across the hilltop like something final. Once, twice, 3 times, then the other wrist. Then the feet, one crossed over the other, a single nail through both. They raised the cross and dropped it into the socket in the rock. The jolt ran through the body and drew from him a sound that was not a word. For 3 hours he hung between earth and sky, pushing upward on the nail through his feet to draw air into his lungs, then falling back when the strength left his legs, then pushing up again. The rhythm of it was terrible. Rise, breathe, fall, rise, breathe, fall. Then the sun went dark. Not clouds, not storm. The light itself withdrew, as if creation would not look at what was being done to the one who made it. In the blackness, a cry broke from the cross, tearing through the silence he had carried since the road. My God, why have you forsaken me? It was the cry of one who had never in eternity known a moment apart from the Father, now swallowing the full measure of that distance so that others never would. The darkness held for 3 hours. Then it lifted, and the man was dead. A soldier drove a spear into his side to make sure. Blood and water poured out, and the body didn't flinch. The soldier thought he was confirming a death. He was sealing a covenant. Simon walked back toward the city, with another man's blood drying on his hands and on his shoulders. The streets were quieter now. In the temple courts, the Passover lambs were being slaughtered. Their blood ran through the stone channels and into the valley below. He could hear the priests chanting, and the copper smell of it reached him on the evening air. He thought of the doorposts in Egypt, painted with the blood of a lamb so that death would pass over. He thought of the blood still dark beneath his fingernails. He thought of the man who had carried something heavier than wood and had not opened his mouth while the world tore him apart. The lamb had always been the plan. Before the temple was built, before the law was carved in stone, before the first sin broke the world the way a millstone cracks dry ground, there was a lamb, chosen and set apart. His blood would cover not doorposts, but souls. His silence would speak louder than every prophet who came before him. His body, given over to iron and wood and a soldier's spear, would pay the debt that no lamb in any market, in any year, in any nation, could ever pay. Simon didn't buy his lamb that day. He did not need to. The sacrifice had already been made, and the wood that bore it had rested on his own shoulders, and the blood that sealed it had soaked into the lines of his own hands. He had not understood it on the road. But standing now in the fading light, with the smell of sacrifice heavy in the air and the hilltop dark against the sky behind him, he understood. The price was everything, and it was enough. Seller.